If you ever are struggling, the advice they often give isn't they like to say, oh, well, what you need to do, they say, lose your inhibitions, talk about your problems to your friends. But I've noticed if you talk about your problems to your friends for long enough, you can also lose your friends, can't you? My recommendation, spread the love a little bit. I like to tell some of my problems to taxi drivers. 2 advantages in this. 1, it stops the taxi driver from telling you their problems. And 2, it's amazing how much quicker you get to your destination. Alternatively, maybe get yourself a bus app. Oh, I love a bus app on my phone. Brilliant. I've got a bus stop virtually outside my house. You check your little bus app, 1 minute to go. You come up, kazam, the bus arrives. The woman who lives opposite me, she thinks I'm psychic. It's fantastic. Every time I'm coming out to catch the bus, she's there getting her coat. He knows it's coming, he knows. He's the bus whisperer, he is. Even David Cameron was interested in our happiness for a while, wasn't he? He got the Cabinet Office to do a big list of all the jobs that we do and to rate them in terms of happiness, so if we ever change jobs, we might be able to look at that list and find one that might make us happier. Out of the 274 jobs that we apparently do, number 1, top of the list for happiness, vicar. 274, bottom job, pub landlord. Now, in some ways, it's quite surprising there's such a gap between those 2 jobs, because in many ways, they're very similar, aren't they? Both looking after dwindling flocks at the moment. Both dish out wine and nibbles. And if you spend long enough in both of their establishments, you start seeing things and thinking imaginary people are talking to you. But of course, there's many things we can't do as individuals, aren't there? You know, and you think that's what we elect governments to do those things that we can't do for ourselves. Right? But this government, they're effectively saying, well, we think we should be doing less and less, and we want you to do more and more. And people went for that, didn't they? That's how far politicians have fallen. We are going to do less for you. Finally. Brilliant. Well done. But in some ways, we would often like them to do more, wouldn't we? David Cameron finally agreed to let in a few more Syrian refugees, but to counter UKIP, he wanted to make sure people knew quite how right-wing he can be on immigration, so he came up with a few other possible ideas, didn't he? What he'd like to do, he said, if it turns out it's legal, only if it turns out it's legal, but what he'd like to do is to take British passports off would-be terrorists who are returning to this country so as they can't enter the country. And you're thinking, well, if you've taken their British passport off them, they're not going to be able to go to any other country, are they? So presumably they're going to be wandering around the airport, which is probably the last place you frickin' want them, isn't it? And then you think, well, what have we done to combat terrorism? Well, we've got a warning system, haven't we? And we've upped that warning system from substantial to severe. So we know that an attack now is highly likely. We can go further, though. We can put it up to critical, meaning an attack is imminent. We've done it twice before. Once after the arrest of the liquid bombers, once after the Glasgow airport bombings. So we in this country, we knew an attack was about to happen just after an attack had happened. What a warning system that is, ladies and gentlemen. That'd be like somebody punching you in the head and then somebody else shouting, "Duck!" And then, on the flip side, they want to do away with the Human Rights Act, don't they? The dream of Winston Churchill, a Conservative Prime Minister. What message does that send out to the rest of the world if we leave the European Convention of Human Rights and Russia stays in? Putin said recently, didn't he? He said only an insane person in a dream could imagine Russia ever suddenly attacking NATO. But just a little bit of you, when he said that, thought, I wonder if you've had that dream. And he was just giving us the heads up on his mental state. And of course, UKIP, they're having their conference, aren't they? Struggling for numbers, so they had to slash the ticket prices. There they are telling us the country is full when they can't even fill their own conference hall, ladies and gentlemen. And obviously they struggled a bit during the election, didn't they? You know, you may remember one of the candidates had to apologise, said, I'm terribly sorry, I'd like to, apologise for my recent comments about Chinese people, only I was on very strong painkillers at the time. Now, I knew if you took Nurofen Plus, you weren't supposed to operate heavy machinery. I didn't know you weren't supposed to operate your own tongue. But then we had the party secretary, didn't we? Recorded saying, yeah, there are hundreds and thousands of bigots in this country and they deserve representation. I would love to have seen UKIP on the doorstep, hello, will you be voting UKIP? Why don't you piss off, you short, fat, clipboard-carrying fairy? I'll put that down as a yes then. And certainly this whole idea that we've got all these foreigners coming into Britain who are criminals, if nothing else, right? That's two-faced given the number of British people who are now residing in Spain in what's known as the Costa del Crime. You can imagine the Spanish version of UKIP going, oh, you don't want those English immigrants moving in next door to you. They're all great train robbers and ex-Top of the Pops presenters, they are. And this idea that we've got all these foreigners coming over to Britain to sponge off the NHS, that's not right, is it? Immigrants are what keeps the NHS going. If you see a migrant in a hospital, chances are they're not a benefit scrounger, they're the consultant. And yes, the NHS in this country faces challenges, but is regarded throughout the world as incredible value for money. If you look at America, health outcomes in America much worse, health costs much, much greater. And yet, when they were introducing Obamacare, various American newspapers said, well, if Stephen Hawking had been British, he wouldn't have stood a chance, right? Because of the NHS. Which I think would be a very powerful argument, wouldn't it? Apart from the fact Stephen Hawking is British and he says he owes his life to the NHS. And I think with the current NHS reforms, there would have been much more of an outcry from the general public if more people understood exactly what was going on. I mean, I don't understand exactly what's going on, but that's not going to stop me trying to explain it to you. As far as I can work out, right, the Secretary of State for Health abdicated responsibility for providing health services, passed it on to what's known as clinical commissioning groups, right, which may include GPs, but because GPs have got quite a lot of GPing to do, more likely to include profit-making companies who will not only decide what health services you can have in your area, but then are also free to, oh, hey presto, provide those services. And surely this whole idea, when we've got necessarily regulated vital national resources, the whole idea that the private sector can do it more cheaply, that's been blown out of the water, isn't it? By one look at the trains. Given that we subsidise them 4 times as much now, although we no longer freaking own them. So I think we're going to be quite angry in a few years' time if maybe instead of an ambulance turning up to take us to hospital, we find there's a replacement ambulance service and we open the door to see 2 blokes in jogging outfits with a stretcher, the 118 ambulance service. And I don't want you to think, right, that I'm against change. Oh, take imperial measures, right? 20 fluid ounces make a pint, don't they? 16 ounces make a pound, 14 pounds make a stone, 12 inches make a foot, 3 feet make a yard, 22 yards make a chain, 10 chains make a furlong, 8 furlongs make a mile, 3 miles make a league, right? Now, some people get turned on by facts, ladies and gentlemen, it's good to see. But with metric measurements, if you want to change measures, don't you? You have to divide by 10 or 100 or 1,000, eh? With imperial measurements, if you want to change measurements, you have to divide by 20 or 16 or 14 or 12 or 22 or 8 or 3. It makes no bastard sense whatsoever, does it? But in 2010, the UKIP manifesto said they wanted to restore pounds and ounces to Britain. And it's been quite a surprising thing to put in a manifesto, given that pounds and ounces have never been banned in Britain. Huh? Pounds and ounces, they originate from a Roman coin. Yeah? So this idea that pounds and ounces were originally British, no, they were originally Italian, but they got rid of them some time ago because they no longer use Roman coins, and nor the frickin' we. So if you wanted to be truly British, you'd get rid of pounds and ounces and you would reintroduce the big rock and the little rock.